Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Eating the Elephant, where we talk about insurance and Hurricane Michael recovery tips. Happy almost New Year, Happy New Year's Eve. Hope everybody had a good time with family and some good food and a little relaxation over the Christmas holiday. And I hope everybody's going to be ready to be in full gear and taking on 2019 with some gusto. I want to begin this evening with kind of a point of parental indulgence, if you will. And I'd like to mention with a great deal of pride that my daughter came home from college, and she's a physics major down in a school in Central Florida that us Seminoles don't like to talk very much about. But she rolled home after her first semester in physics with a 3.7 GPA in the honors program. So I wanted to just give her a little shout out and tell her how proud I was of her. And it makes you feel good in the midst of all of this mess. So there's still some good things going on outside the 850 here. So I wanted to start with that. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some things that you might be more familiar with. One of the comments that's come up over and over again is from folks that say, I just don't understand this process. This is all very unfamiliar to me. And I think that's one of the reasons people have made some decisions that may not have been in their best interest early on. And I think most of us, obviously I'm somebody that's been deeply involved in insurance for a very long time, but most people's experience with insurance companies is paying their bill, and a lot of times the only claims experience they have is probably with an auto accident. If you've not been unlucky enough to have been in an accident, good for you, but for those of you with some experience in insurance, that might be your only experience with a claim. And what I would say is, if you have that experience back in your history, maybe use that to inform your current experience. And I know that sounds a little odd because this instances certainly don't seem like they're very much alike. But let me explain to you what I'm talking about here. If you got in an auto accident, what do? What do most people do? Well, you talk to each other, you make sure if everybody's okay after the wreck. That's what most people focused on right after the storm, was making sure everybody was okay. And then once you get past that, then you need to get into the claims process. And what do? Well, if you had an accident, you usually call law enforcement so they can do a police report. You trade insurance information. And then what do? You call your agent, typically. Sometimes you call an 800 number and report the claim. And then you work with either the adjuster or the agent. And then you work with a body shop. You call somebody to fix the car, and you set up a way to do that. Frankly, there's no reason to believe that the current situation works any differently at its base, at its DNA. Certainly the details are going to be very different, and the scale is much, much different. We also have some difficulty in that right after you have a wreck, well, finding a body shop is not very difficult. You go to somebody you know typically, you get them to give you an estimate, they work it out with the insurance company, and you get on about fixing your car. That's a little more difficult right now when you don't have contractors that you know, and the contractors that are here are very, very busy, and frankly, they're pretty pricey right now. There's a considerable demand surge. So it doesn't mean that you can't use some of the same principles if the insurance company offered you less than the body shop tells you it's going to cost to fix your car. Well, what would you do? In that situation, you'd either call your agent and ask some questions, or you might call your insurance company and you might say, hey, it's going to cost me $400 more than you guys told me. Why don't you call the body shop and you guys see what's different? It's also going to be similar in that once they start taking parts off of your damaged vehicle, the body shop often finds more damage. Okay, that's not a problem. The body shop calls up the adjuster and says, hey, when we pulled off the front bumper, we found a bent so-and-so, and we need to replace this so-and-so part as well, so you're going to need to increase your estimate. Not very controversial, not terribly difficult, maybe costs you a day or two in playing phone tag. But that baseline of how you handle your auto insurance claim can be very much the way you handle your current homeowner's claim. What do? Well, when you put a tree through your living room, what did most people do? I think some people called their agent or called their insurance company over an 800 number. Some people, rather than do that, immediately called a third party, such as an attorney or a public adjuster, sometimes out of fear, sometimes not out of understanding the process. And so you really didn't give the insurance company a chance to do their job. And I think that has certainly put some people in a tough position. And I'm not specifically speaking to any particular contractor or PA or attorney firm, but what I am saying is that people reacted in this situation very, very differently than they would to any other kind of claim scenario. And what I would say is, if it's unfamiliar to you, go back to what's familiar. Go back to the people that are familiar, go back to the processes that are familiar wherever it's possible, and try to look at what you would do in a non-catastrophe situation. If this was normal, what would I do? And try as best you can to parallel the current situation that you have to what's going on now. Certainly it's going to be a little different because the infrastructure is very stressed. We're dealing with unfamiliar situations, we're dealing with unfamiliar people and unfamiliar contractors. But as an example, if you had a fire in your home and you hired a contractor, you would tend to hire someone you knew. You would have a price on the contract that you signed with that person, and you would not sign an assignment of benefits. No, AOB, we've talked about that over and over again. Now, just because we're in a catastrophe situation doesn't mean you should necessarily change your approach significantly to that event. So, I don't want to get into every specific detail, but what I do want to say is, just because you don't have thorough experience in this specific post-catastrophe situation doesn't mean you don't have good experience of your own and good experience of trusted friends and advisors that you can lean on and sort of bring to the back of your mind when you're trying to deal with the current situation. I wanted to mention a couple of other things that aren't directly related to the storm, but have caused a little bit of difficulty with some folks, and they are insurance related. One is what I'm going to call the flood follies, because the National Flood Insurance Program is basically, it's not really insurance. If you have flood insurance, likely if it's with the federal government, it's not really insurance. It's a federal assistance program, much like crop insurance, and it doesn't really fully operate like insurance does. And it operates under language and rules and claims procedures that are set by the federal government. Now, I have a little bit of a touchy relationship with the federal government. I'm not always a fan of their work, regardless of your political stripe. But what I would say is that the current flood program was due to expire in December, and at the last second, Congress whipped in and did what they often do, which is at the very last moment they reauthorized the program, and it's good through next May. They didn't do a have any long-term solution because, of course, cooperation in Washington, D.C. right now is all but forgotten. So they did that, and so they said, oh, we've saved the flood program, everything operates as normal. Then immediately thereafter, FEMA came out with their guidance that said, well, now the federal government is shutting down, so after December 22nd, no flood insurance policies can be issued and no policies can be renewed. They will be held to be invalid. So all of this went out across the national news. I posted some issues or some examples about what was going to happen on Facebook and what I feared was going to cause some confusion and in some cases panic. Fortunately, shortly thereafter, just so you'll all know, a bunch of what appeared to have happened is a bunch of U.S. senators started calling administrators at FEMA, yelling and screaming. And the next thing you know, on this past Friday night, then they reversed themselves, and FEMA said no, the flood insurance program will operate as normal. It's another good example of how the government doesn't run insurance particularly well. And you might also be interested to know that there are an awful lot of very viable, very well-funded private insurance options available for flood insurance now. Not everybody's eligible, and if you're in the highest risk areas, chances are you won't be able to find a competitive price with a private market. But it might be something to ask your agent about is, hey, do I need to be in the federal flood insurance program, or are there better options and less expensive options out there? What we have found is in many cases pricing is better in the private market, and coverage is almost always better. As one example, in the private flood insurance market, you can get coverage for additional living expense, just like you do on your homeowner's policy. That is not available in the federal flood insurance program. So just so you know, you have some options now, because frankly, the federal government does like to make a mess of things on occasion. One other topic I wanted to mention is I'd like for us to continue to do what I call the call-out, shout-out methodology of social media. And not just in social media, but in your social circles as a whole. When I say call out and shout out, if you are seeing bad behavior, call it out and call it out by name. Now, I can't just say take a social media rumor about a particular firm and run with it. I think that's irresponsible. I think what you need to do is do your homework. And I have seen an awful lot of folks being a little bit more healthily skeptical on social media when they see something that accuses a company of bad behavior. I've seen a lot more people, instead of raging on it, simply asking questions. Well, did you think of this? Did you talk to that? Did you contact that provider of services? Before people go kind of high and right. And I would like for you guys, if you will, to continue this methodology. If you see bad behavior, call it out, call it by name, and give specific examples of what's going on. By the same token, I think you should give a shout out to those that are behaving well. Insurance companies that are performing very, very well for you, if you are happy with your experience, with your agent, with your adjuster, with your carrier, say so. And don't say so just as a confirmation of you having hired them. Wait and have some experience. I talked to someone earlier this week who had hired an attorney. It wasn't my client, but it had hired an attorney to help them with their claim. And they were just thrilled, and they were gushing about this attorney and all of the brilliant work they had done. And when I got to questioning them about their experience, well, they had hired them mere hours before. So it seemed unlikely that that attorney had been able to do anything other than maybe give them a good sales pitch, and hadn't really been able to perform for them at all. So if you're going to give somebody credit or to give somebody a ding, then you need to make sure it's based on experience and not based on hearsay. So again, call out and shout out where you can, and let's give a boost to those that are doing good things, and let's try to chase off the bad performers that much more quickly. And finally, I want to say, let's keep the pressure on. It is time, it is long enough after the storm that insurance companies need to be sort of in the late stages of helping you to recover. Now, I don't mean that that's going to be in a position where you're going to be getting final payments or anything such as that. Just getting contractors to your house and getting them to work, getting through the mortgage company process, all of that's going to take some more time. But if you are not getting substantial funds in your hands now, and if you are not getting substantial calls back, if you're not getting timely response from your insurance company, you do not need to take your foot off the gas and be patient. Now is not the time for patience any longer. You need to press forward, keep your foot on the gas, and keep the pressure on. You need to stay on the phone. You need to call every day if necessary, as we talked about early in this Eating the Elephant series. If you are not having good results, by now, you need to be talking to two people. One is your agent. You need to be on them every single day. And the other folks you need to be talking to are very likely at CFO Jimmy Petronis' office. And as we normally do, I'm going to finish with those numbers. But before we do, I want to tell you that we're not going to have an Eating the Elephant episode either this coming Wednesday or a week from now on Sunday. We're going to skip 2 in a row because I'm taking a break and I'm going to have a little recreation with my family. And I'll give you guys a break from me and my babbling about insurance. I do hope that you ring in 2019 well, and I hope that 2019 is an excellent year for all of you. It's certainly going to be better for us than 2018 treated us. No matter your experience and no matter your situation in 2018, it certainly didn't end all that well for any of us. And I think if we can all focus on what it will look like here in Bay County at this time next year, and we look at how we're going to end 2019, I think it'll be that much more encouraging for you. Things will be nice. Hopefully things will be green. We won't have debris piles. We won't have Mad Max trucks running around, and hopefully everybody will have a nice shiny new home. I'm going to leave you with a couple of phone numbers as always. 822-STORM is the Storm helpline with the Department of Financial Services. And if you need help with our office, with our public helpline, if you have insurance questions, insurance help that you need and you're not getting them from somewhere else for free, without any obligation, without any contracts, without any fees, we'll be glad to help you in the afternoons. You can text or call us and leave a message at 273-9356. We'll be glad to help you out. Again, I hope you have a great New Year's. Please be safe. Please don't drink and drive. And we'll see you a little more than a week from now. Happy 2018 and a much happier 2019.